Hi everybody, my name is Leo. I live in a rich family. I have everything my age can dream of, but I'm still unhappy because my parents are fools. It's not an insult, it's just stating a fact. Anyway, my family always had everything. They were born into rich families. They had money from birth and they don't know what need means. They married young by agreement of their fathers. Their dads decided to merge the two empires in order to increase their wealth. Lucky in that dad and mum really loved each other, but there was one but. They didn't want to have children. 4 years went by, then 7, then 10, still no children. As my grandfather Hans used to say, an empire demands heirs. My other grandfather Grid agreed with him. However, my parents didn't give a damn about their opinion. All my mother was into was socializing, gossip, and fashion. And my father was into cars. No, come to work for his father, doing small jobs and getting a lot of dough for it. But as time went on, the grandfathers got older and started talking to the kids in earnest. They sat them down in their office and started a dialogue. Son, Grid and I are glad that your marriage to Ella is filled with love and understanding. Glad that your life has turned out this way, that you love each other. But love alone is not enough when you have an enormous burden of responsibility behind you. What do you mean, Papa? About the fact that you and my daughter ought to be parents by now. It's been 11 years since you were married. You were young then and we didn't bother you. We didn't bother you, but things have changed now. We're suffering. The empire needs new powers and heirs. So what's the problem? We are your heirs. Daughter, do you know anything about bonds and the stock market? But why should I? That's right, you don't need it. And what will happen when I or Hans is gone? Oh, Dad, you're doing it again. You know what will happen. Ideally, you would take over the company, but how long will you last? Do you doubt me? Don't listen to them, honey. You're the smartest one I've got. Enough. Leave the niceties at the doorstep. This is a serious matter. We need an heir, and that's it. If you don't settle the matter within 3 months, we'll disinherit you. My parents came out of it upset and puzzled. But then another problem arose. My mother could not get pregnant. They shared this news with my grandfathers, and they became even more worried. Mum was treated, went around the world. They tried, but nothing worked. I don't know what Mum was upset about, the possible disinheritance or the fact that she wouldn't be able to have her baby. Anyway, my grandfather suggested another way out of this situation: adoption. Dad resisted, but Mum convinced him that otherwise they would be left with nothing. My grandfathers found me. They came to the orphanage and began to observe the children. Turned out that I was the only one who didn't rush at them with greedy eyes. They showed the money and the children started asking to give them more and more. And I just sat and watched. Hans came up to me and asked me some questions. And why are you sitting here alone? Why aren't you asking for money? Free money only in a mousetrap. You're obviously doing some kind of test, or maybe you're just laughing. If the second, then you are complete morons. And if the first, I do not pass the tests, the conditions of which I do not know. For the record, I was only 5 years old. My grandparents pointed me out without a second thought, and my parents adopted me. They started dragging me around to all sorts of cool schools, provided a huge nursery, a babysitter, a personal maid, and everything. I also called my parents' parents for a tick, and spent most of my time with my grandparents. I understood that they were invested in me for a reason, because I was their future. Grandson, how's school going? How's the course going? Everyone praises you. I'm very proud of you. Come, sit down with me. I went into my grandfather's house, where we arrived with my parents. My father and mother immediately went to hang out in the garden, and I sat down next to Grandpa. He was watching his favorite movie. Grandpa hugged me. You've grown so much. I can't even believe it's been so many years. 7 years since you adopted me. Do you remember that day? I don't think I'll ever forget it. Are you glad you came here? I'm grateful. What about glad? Are you happy with us? Why do you ask that question? I want to know. I sighed. I didn't know whether to tell the truth or not, but I knew that Grandpa was waiting for an answer. And since I was not good at lying, I told it like it was. I don't feel like I'm in the family. Grandpa was surprised and asked what I felt then, and I said I got into school or a job where I have yet to work. What do you mean? My parents, they're more like brother and sister to me. They're always hanging out together. They don't care about me because they didn't want kids. They always wanted to hang out. No, your mum wanted you. She just couldn't. Grandpa, you could have at least 3 nephews right now. What are you talking about? Nothing, I'm telling you what I see. Grandpa changed his face, called my mum and dad over, and I went outside. But sitting in the garden, I could hear him yelling at my mother. She couldn't have children. She just didn't want to. Neither did my father. They didn't want it. They had a big fight, and then my dad and mum took me away and we went home. Of course, there they told me off, that I was no longer needed, that they didn't want me, and that I was a cocky kid who didn't appreciate expensive things and a house with servants when my peers lived on the street or in an orphanage. The next day, my grandfathers informed me that they were going to sign over half my inheritance to me, and the other half to my mother and father, 25% of the total estate. Although this amount was not small, they were furious, saying that I should be a stranger to my grandfathers. Dad, you promised that you would sign over your inheritance to me. Change of plans. I'll rewrite the will. What do we have to do to get you to change your mind? Give us more heirs. With these words, we drove home. I overheard the ancestors talking. They were seriously considering having children just to stay on the money. And this became a threat to me, for I was inferior to my blood grandchildren. I could not allow that to happen. I timed it strictly, watching my mother. She was drinking tea or lemonade at the same time. I decided to make contact with her, become more open, began to communicate closer. I was lucky that she was stupid and didn't even think my actions were strange. I slipped some drugs into her food so she couldn't get pregnant, and I slipped something into the bottle of whiskey that my dad drank in the evenings. In the end, my plan worked. Mum couldn't get pregnant, and Dad fell asleep every night after a glass of whiskey. Such double protection I had. 6 months later, my parents decided to go to the doctor for a checkup. They told them to take some tests. I realized that blood tests can reveal everything, so that day I sent an anonymous message that I was allegedly kidnapped. I hid in a secluded place and waited. It was quite a ruckus. Then I got my clothes dirty and went to my grandfather's house at night, where my parents and Grandpa Grid were. Oh my God, where have you been? Are you all right? Yes, Grandpa, I'm scared. I don't know who it was, what they wanted. Oh God, my heart, I feel sick. Where is my grandson? I'm here, Grandpa. I turned on the acting, pity, tears and all. But the main thing that I disrupted my parents' plans to go to the doctor, and the event hastened the grandfathers about the inheritance. Because Grandpa Hans got very sick from worrying about me, he was afraid for me, and for himself. He thought he would not survive the night with such a condition. I said I didn't remember anything at all, didn't see anything, and the same night we had our guards beefed up and the inheritance was signed over to me. I got my way. Are you going to say I'm conniving now? Yes, but when you grow up in an orphanage, you get used to the fact that every day of your life is a struggle to survive. In fact, we had a similar business plan with the grandfathers and me. Everybody wanted to keep the money. I wasn't going to ditch them or get rid of my parents, I just wanted a cut, which I deserved, and I didn't determine the size of it, mind you. Everybody got what they deserved. After the mock incident, my parents stopped caring about the kids, went on with their lives, and I studied even harder to get an education and a knowledge base for the business. In the end, everyone was left in the black. Now, isn't that a fairy tale? What would you have done if you were me? What would you have done? Write your options in the comments below. I'll read them all.
Hi, my name is Martin. I want to tell you something about myself, or rather, about my parents. So to speak, share with you. I think you'll be as shocked as I am, and it'll be fully justified. Tell me, do you have parents? And what are they? How do they treat you? I know that all of them may not be perfect. Perhaps you often quarrel with them, argue, and sometimes you really want to get out of the house, right? Here, I also have this happen here. Well, it was more accurate. While they're not going to sell me, you know how it is. Like things or products. Here you are tired of a thing, or it's outdated, and you decide to get rid of it in a way that's profitable for you. They decided to do the same thing with me. Unpleasant? Oh, and how unpleasant it was when I found out about it. If you want to know all the details, then listen further. By the way, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Put a like and be sure to write your opinion in the comments. To begin with, I'm the oldest child in the family. There's two other children, my twin brothers, John and Jack. Well, so you can roughly understand how the family treats them and me. If there's something delicious left in the house, then it's given to the twins, and it doesn't matter whether they want it or not. When we go to the store, first to buy all the youngest, and to me, most, is I always tried to look after them, help them with their homework, pick up from school, kindergarten, mug. Sometimes my mother made me cook special breakfasts, where you need to show maximum culinary skills. Yes, it was very unpleasant for me, and parents always have one argument for everything. They are younger than you. Of course, the question, so what, was always forced on me. But I got a couple of slaps on the back of the head for it and haven't asked since. It didn't seem to complain much. I even thought it was all right to live like this. Until I grew up. Well, then I started to see how life works in other families. I made friends where I saw how all children are treated equally, and it touched me. I never complained to anyone, and, of course, did not reprimand my ancestors. I didn't want to be any extra problems. And over the years, the resentment grew. And then something even more unpleasant happened. I'll tell you what. This happened a few years ago. The whole family went to a camping trip. Mom bustled around the kitchen all morning making beautiful sandwiches for us. As always, I dragged heavy bags and packed everything in the car. I took a few boxes at a time, and they blocked my path. I honestly didn't see that John ran right out to meet me. In short, I crashed into him and all the boxes fell on him. They weren't exactly heavy, but he got hit on the head and lost consciousness. Can you imagine how hysterical my mother was? We immediately went to the hospital, where John was quickly revived. He was okay, just bumped his head a little. I think my mother was even worse off that day than he was. When I got home, I got a beating. I got the full amount, was accused of all the deadly sins, and it seemed that my mother was ready to just slap me, but restrained herself with the last of her strength. Everything I said sounded like a pathetic excuse, so I chose to remain silent. From that day on, my mother didn't speak to me for 2 weeks. Whenever I didn't try to make up, she ignored me. 2 days later, some people came to our house. I saw them talking to my mother about something. My mother was given an envelope. She signed somewhere and called me. She introduced me to these people, Mr. and Miss Jones. These are your new parents, she said. What? What do you mean? I expected a lot, that I would be deprived of money, internet, TV, dates with friends. Not that I'd be sold. At this moment, all the childish resentments, misunderstandings, and anger woke up in me. I felt so broken, so unnecessary, and it was terrible. I couldn't believe my mom would just sell me out like that. All she said to me at parting was that they were good people and that they were rich. I packed my things, still in a state of shock, and left the house. No one even said goodbye to me. I got in the car and we drove. I was silent all the way, even though these people tried to talk to me. They were very nice, tried to please me in every possible way, offered to stop by some stores to buy anything, but I didn't even know what to do now. How is this possible? When we got home, they showed me my room. I didn't leave it for 3 days. I didn't want to eat or drink. My new parents were worried. They tried to feed me, lured me with goodies, but I refused flatly. I needed time to digest the events. I was shattered, and then I decided to take some pills. It occurred to me that if my parents didn't need me, then who did? I found something in the medicine cabinet and drank, lay down on the bed, and felt how bad I was getting. The new mother came running into the room just as I was about to pass out. I woke up in the hospital, and they were giving me IVs. My new parents were sitting next to me, crying. Surprisingly, they were crying for a child they barely knew. Why? When I came to, my parents, they were very happy. They kissed me, hugged me, and scolded me for what I had done. My mother wiped away her tears, told me never to do it again. It was nice. For the first time in my life, I felt that someone needed me. In the end is when I started feeling better. When I got back to their house, I noticed that they had a really nice house and that they were so nice to me. My new dad showed me all the rooms, allowed me to go to his office sometimes, and my mom took me to the shops and dressed me up. Yes, I felt a little different in attitude. Love, awe, and warmth. It was strange to feel comfort from strangers more than from one's own parents. My mother would read me interesting books at night. My father would meet me after school. And every day, we would build me a new bike from scratch. It was so cool to do something for yourself with your own hands. So about 6 months passed, and one day, my old parents came to our house. That mother was crying and asked me to come back. She said she made a mistake and regretted it. Come back to our house, son. We miss you, she said. The new mother got up from her chair and indignantly told them to leave the house. My old mother took an envelope of money out of her pocket and threw it on the table, saying that they'd changed their minds. We don't need money, she said. Ah, is that so? All your life you've been abusing him, hating him, humiliating him in every possible way, selling him to us for a measly $10,000. And now you have decided to take him away, allegedly out of good feelings? Do you think I don't know that my son is being offered $500,000 to someone who will lead him to an old man Francis? My mother shouted. I sat there and didn't understand what was happening. Old Mom wiped her eyes and started talking to me, like she misses me so much and loves me. I asked the new mother who Francis was. Then my mother told me that in fact, when I was born, I had real parents and they were my new parents. It so happened that my grandfather, Francis, being a very influential man, told his son to give his first child to him to raise. He planned to take the child and to take it to another country to raise as their heir to the empire. But my parents loved me very much, so they didn't want to give me up. They left me with a babysitter named Selina to hide me for a while, and when my parents came back for me, I was gone. Selina said that I was stolen from her, but in fact, she sold me to people who couldn't have children of their own. I grew up in a new family, but when I was 9 years old, my parents had their own children, and I fell by the wayside, and then I became a burden. We've been looking for you all these years, but we had to do it quietly, without making any noise, so that your grandfather wouldn't take you away from us, and he seems to have found out about you, and is now offering $500,000 to catch you, the father said. My old parents pretended they had nothing to do with it. There was silence in the air. I still didn't really understand what was going on, but my real mom sat down next to me and hugged me. She said there was no way in the world she was going to give me up to anyone now. The guests got up and left, with the psycho taking their money again, and were now deciding what to do and how to hide from the annoying grandfather. This is my story, friends. So now I'm even glad that I was sold, because I got my own parents, and also became rich.